Good morning, super users. Welcome back to Excel Super User Program and Excel User Series 6.0. In our today's session, we will talk about how to create an interactive dashboard, and we will also see how we're gonna prolong our learning in PivotTable and how to consolidate data in PivotTable using Power Query and Power Pivot. I didn't add any values or the link for the classes here. Before I upload this file, I will be adding the class 8 video link for iSelf Academy and as well as Excel snippet. In today's video, we are about to talk on how to create an interactive dashboard in Excel. Again, if I slowly and steadily created it, it will take a good long 45 minutes for me to build it, but I'm going to make it a little faster. Again, if I build it in the old style, the number of cache that will create will be a brand new cache for every dashboard sheet that I'm creating. If not, it's going to become a little different here. Again, let's see before I start the session, so what we are going to learn in the next session too. So this is what I'm going to teach you in the next session. So I'm going to go for 58 different functions in PivotTable. I'll call this as Power PivotTable 2.0. I already have done this particular program in Click to Campus once, and then now I'm recreating that one more time. Again, in this we will also touch a little bit of Power Pivot, and a Power Query introduction will be added. If you are using PivotTable, irrespective of what version you use, don't worry about it. We're going to learn a lot. And these are the 55 topics that I'm going to touch, plus the 2 topics that I will touch on Power Pivot and Power Query. So let's see how we're going to use PivotTable extensively possible. Few of the topics I've already covered. Probably I have touched data until the first 7 sets here. So this is what we have done in our day 1 of our PivotTable. We'll be doing more on PivotTable as we go forward. So we will learn furthermore topics in our list when we come back on our next session. So our agenda today will be on the first 2 logics of it. So we are going to talk about how to create an interactive dashboard in PivotTable, and how do I create a chart, and how I create slicer, how I connect them all one by one, and then how I can add a text to the pivot table as a header, and then how I'll format that using one of the most used function in Microsoft Word called the text feature, where we'll say a word art will be a part of our learning. Again, I'm not teaching Word here, I'm teaching Excel, but still I'm using one of the Microsoft Word applications, word art, in our pivot table, so that it will make our data look a little better. Without further ado, let's go to the data set. Again, I'm going to use this particular data for most of our workout. Let me just show you how this data will be used and then what we are about to learn out of it. Again, I'm adding this data for our usage. So this is the file. Again, I've added a folder separately for it. This is where our next day's files, practice file, will be added here. And here we are going to learn one more dimension here, that is, I'm going to create a raw data for our list. So I've created a list for us, the raw data front. Let me just open another book which I've recently built for us. So I think that the saving part is not done in the respective directory, I believe. So let me just add this here. So again, this is our file, and this is going to be the file that we will be using almost every instant possible by us. Let's see how we're going to use all these dimensions one by one. Again, it is in the same point, but not in our Excel file. If you closely watch this data, I have a data of the following list, and then that goes for somewhere around 6 to 8 years time. So I have data from 1st of 2016, so that is 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So I have a full 8-year data set with me. Here I have a data set, and I would like to create an interactive dashboard where I can see the whole data set in one single view. Again, I'm really sorry, I'm disappointing few of the people who are giving ads about dashboards creation in less than few minutes, and then dashboard creation using AI tool and so on and so forth. They all say that they are going to do those component at much lesser than the time that they actually consume to build it. Again, I'm not going to do anything very big here. I'm going to just say I'll take 25 minutes to complete this. Again, this is going to be a very simple dashboard creation. I'm not going to do anything really very big, nor I'm going to use a lot of charts here. I'm going to use one kind of a chart in the entire dashboard creation. I'm going to make it more interactive for the end user. I'm going to make it more readable for the end user. I'm not creating any kind of a fuss here saying that I will do this in 10 minutes time, 20 minutes time. Again, if you want a proper dashboard, you have to spend time. Whatever time that is required for you, you have to spend that without fail. So I'm not offending anybody. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody by that way. I'm really sorry about that. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to create an interactive dashboard right now. Again, how do I create this interactive dashboard is I'm going to build the dashboard one by one in our data set, and then I'm going to create this by a specific agenda. So let's see how I'm going to do that. The first agenda I'm going to keep 5 different data sets in my list here. So I'm picking one by one. The first part is I'm going to pick up the yearly sales, and then I'm going to be more relevant here. So let me just make it the last 5 years. I'll filter the data for the last 5 years later. So this is what I'll do first, and then the next part that I'm going to do is I want to find out the regional sales here, and then I'm going to go for the sales rep sales, and then I want to go by the customer sales, and then finally I'm going to go for the product sales. So these are the sales data that I want to build. I can build them up. If I want a different dimension, instead of a sale, if I want a profit, so how do I build a calculated field here? We will just discuss about that too in our data set here. Again, anyway, we are going to touch all these dimensions in a detailed pattern in our next video. Again, that's going to go for 2 full hours of data set. So we'll try to keep it as effectively as possible, because I want to keep that data a little engaging, so that will make our learning a little better. So my agenda for the data set today will be this. So where I will be touching data sets where we are about to see how to work with them one by one, and how we're going to use these dimensions a little better. So I want to show all of them, so that's why I'm just keeping it. Again, I can filter the entire data for the last 5 years alone, or I can just keep it only for the yearly sales and leave the other dimensions accordingly. So the filtering point can also be discussed in here. Again, I'm not going to build the entire pivot table one by one. The first pivot table I'll take a little more time to build it, and the subsequent data sets is going to be purely how to duplicate this sheet multiple times and then change the respective agendas that we are about to fill in here. Again, we all know that in our previous class I said that the moment I add a date, my system will automatically group them, and if I don't want the group, then I will be just going to the actual option button, and then I will uncheck or I'll disable the grouping option that is there available in our data tab in our Excel options. Again, I'm gonna go do that because I need them to automatically trigger the grouping techniques are here. So let's start the data set. Again, if you want to start the pivot table by using Alt NVT keyboard shortcut, I preferably try to put them in a data set here. Again, this data set I'm going to use time and again for our logical test, for our X lookups and V lookups and so on and so forth. So please try to go through this data a little bit. This is a data, it's a imaginary data I've created by myself, and then I'm just implementing that in our routine works here. You can have your own data also, and you can try this in your own data. There will be a subtle variant in it, but again, most of the data will be similar to whatever I teach in here. So I'm going to go back to my insert tab and then pick up the pivot table data set here. Again, I'm not converting this data into a table. The reason why is I'm not going to update this data. I'm going to keep this data as constant. If you are updating or if you're getting a data on a regular basis where the updations are happening, please convert this particular data set to a table feature. By that way, any automatic updation comes into play, refresh rate will be easier for us. Again, I'm working on a static data here, so I am not about to do anything on this list. I'm going to give an OK. By that way, it's going to add a new sheet in front of my data set. Again, I'm going to drag and drop the sheet after the raw data, and then I'm going to rename them first here. I'm going to call this as yearly sales, or I can just say yearly. And then on the top of the data, I'm going to call this as a yearly sales here. So I'm going to just merge and center it, because why I'm creating these sets of data sets in here will be, it's to build my reporting a little later. So I always see the pivot table cache on the left the moment I click it here. So that's going to populate all my fields here. I have all my fields here. If I am going to use all these fields or one of the fields here for my data set, I'm not really worried about it. If I want to build a new data set, I can also do that. So if I want to find out the profit of these dimensions, then I'll go back to my pivot table analysis. Before I start my calculation, I'll go to field items and sets and create a calculated field here. The moment I do it, I'm going to create a new field for my data set. Again, this will be available only in my pivot table here. It is not going to be added in my raw data that is existing in my previous sheet. So I'm going to call this as profit, and this profit comes from my sale minus my purchase. So I'm going to pick up the sales, and then I'm going to minus that with my purchases here. And then I'm going to just say add this data set to my sheet, and then I'm going to give an OK. Now you will have one more dimension here. The moment I added this is a measure in our pivot table calculation, so it automatically jumps to my value field here. Now I want to pick up the yearly sales here. The moment I give the date here, the other dimensions of the date will automatically populate here. So now we can see when I do it, it automatically adds 4 different dimensions for me. I have a date, I have a month, I have a quarter, and I have a year. I'm interested only in the yearly point, so I don't want the date, neither I want a month and a quarter year. That's going to remove all my data sets here. So I'm going to make it a little more readable for me. So now we can see that this is automatically adding a list. Again, my data set have the recent updations on the formatting part, so the system takes the data automatically here. We all know how to bring the row label cleaning, so I'm going to go back to my design. I'll go to report layout, and then I'll say show in tabular form. So by that way, it's going to showcase my data. Again, if I'm looking for the years alone here, not the year within brackets date, I'm going to give a right click here, go to my field settings, and then I will remove this data set out of the equation here. And if I want to see the profit alone as a header here, again, I'm going to give a right click here. I'll go back to value field settings. Again, I'll convert this into profit. Or if you want to be more specific here, I'll call this as yearly profit. So that will be even more relevant. I already have the year in front of my data set. You don't have to specify in this way. I want to differentiate my data set here. That's why I'm doing this. Plus, I would like to retain the formatting as accounting, but it's already formatted here. So that makes my life a little more easier. If not, I'll be formatting this data form. So now I got all my basic pivot table intact. Again, this doesn't stop here because I want to build the next stage of my pivot table also, that's called pivot chart. We all know the pivot chart's keyboard shortcut already, so I'm going to give an Alt F1. I'll reiterate that again to add a chart. Place your cursor in your pivot table and then start pressing the keyboard shortcut Alt F1. Again, as I told you earlier before I start, I am about to use only the first 5, so last 5 years of our data set. At the moment, I'll keep all of them, and then later on I'll filter out by adding the years accordingly, so that when I populate the data, my filtration will happen according to the years that I fill in here. Again, as usual, when I build a pivot table here, so my pivot tables and charts will not come spick and span. I'm going to just click the total here, remove it, and click the background lines and delete it. And I want to get the name of the chart as yearly sales here. Again, I've given a profit here, so let me just reiterate this. I'll make the merge go out of it. I'll merge it to the data set, and then I'll call this as profit. So now I got the list. I'll place the cursor in total, and then I'll go back to my formula bar above. I'll give equals, select the yearly profit and give an enter. So now I got the headers for the data set, and I would like to keep the data or the numbers on top of the data sets. I'll go for the plus button, add a data label to it, and then I will make sure the data set comes in millions here. So all the values are going beyond a million here. So I'm going to go back to my format axis and change the data to millions here. By that way, the additional zeros will go off and my dataset will showcase all the dataset that I wish to see in this list here. If you want to make sure that this dataset gives you all the data clean and clearly, I don't want additional buttons or the filters here, because I'm going to use a slicer to make sure the dataset comes nice and clearly here. So for this, what I will do is I will just remove the field button out of the equation. When I remove the field button in the pivot table chart analysis, that goes off the list. I can add back if I wanted to. If I don't want, I can remove it. So I'm removing all the list so that my pivot table looks more detailed right now. I can reduce the size of this pivot table if I wanted to. By that way, I can still see the data set uninched, or it's not moving a lot. If I make this as a 5-year period, that will become even more better. So I can add a slicer for this data alone, and then I'm going to add a year and then give an OK. Then I will make them into multiple column here. Again, I generally don't do this, and then I'm going to go for the slicer settings here and hide an item with no data in it. And here I'm going to take the last 5 years, so let me color them exactly with my data set, and then I'm going to pick up only those years which I am interested to show. So the last 5 years is what I'm going to show. So the rest of them are filtered out here already. So when I bring this particular chart, and then when I try to add the data set by the years here, or when I connect the slices here by the years, automatically other charts will also show the last 5 years sales. So I made only 218 million sales here in the last 5 years. Again, when I come back to the pivot table, when I jump back to my raw data again, my first agenda is complete here. You can see that my first agenda is complete here. So where I started working with data sets, I just gave the yearly sales for us. Now I would like to do this data set, or I would like to keep the data set for the other 4 dimensions. I will not recreate this sheet from scratch again. Instead, I'm going to just give a right click here and then move or copy the data, and then create a copy of this data at the bottom. And then I'm going to change only the data sets here. So now the next logic is I want to find out the regional sales here. So I'm going to come down here. We'll call this as regional sales here. And when I come down to the regional sales, I have to do a few more changes. Not just the renaming of sheet is required, but also the renaming of our data set is also required. And then I'll swap the data from year to region. And all the formattings are intact. I can keep this data if I wanted to, because I'm only seeing the last 5 years here, because this enables me to keep the 5-year data sets intact for me, because I added the slicer much earlier. But the coloring should be changing here, because I cannot keep the same color for all my charts. So I'll go back to my charts here, or I'll just pick up the chart design and then change the colors alone. So I'll pick up the colors here of the chart, and then I'll change the color to something else. Yes, I'm changing this to orange. I will retain the same color for my slicers too. So keep the standard colors intact, so that when you are using the data set, you will actually know how this data works for you. Now I know the regional part, because I didn't work anything very big here. The moment I chose the data set, that's giving you all the information for me. I didn't create the pivot table, nor I created the chart, nor the slicer here. So let's jump back again. I'm going to create the next 3 dimensions up next here. So I'm going to give a right click here. I'll create all of them in one single shot, create a copy of it, and then right click, create a copy of it, and then right click, create the copy of it. So by this way, I am saving a lot of time, because I'm anyway going to build them all one by one. So the next logic is going to be on rep. So I'll come back here. I'll call this as the rep profit. If you want, you can add the sales rep profit here. I'm in the sheet, I'm making it as small as possible, and then instead of a region, I'm taking a rep here. Again, as usual, when I come down to this data set, I will change the color of the data set. I'm going to pick up some other color, and then I'm going to change the colors in my slices too. So I'm taking standardization colors here, but that will make my life a little more easier. Again, I'm going to bring this, and then I'm going to just call this as customer, and I will add the customer profit here on top. Again, my formatting takes a little longer than normal because I'm taking a data set here. Again, when I come back to this data, my data set will become a little different because I have to really make this a little more lengthier because I have a lot of customers is in place. And if you want to readjust, because this is the biggest chart that I will also concentrate when I come back here, and I'm retaining the last 5 years of sales here. So I retain the charts in every component possible. I'm not taking all the data that I have earlier. I have 9 years of data earlier. I'm only concentrating on the last 5 years here. And finally, I'm going to change this colors also. So I'll come back to my design and change this color to maybe a gray, and change the same color in my slices, because I'm going to keeping the slices as it is so that it's going to be specific to the region. And then finally, I'm going to bring the product into play. And again, I'm adding a product here, and then I'll come back here again. Now I've closed my pivot field list here. So the moment I place the cursor in my chart, my pivot field list is not coming. So I'll go back to my pivot table analysis and click the field list. That's going to populate my field list again. I'm going to remove the region out of the equation. I'm going to add a product. Again, the product is coming nice and short, and then I'm going to make a different color here. I'll come back to design. I'll change the color to a lighter blue, and then change this to a lighter blue from my slicer too. So I use the last set of colors here. I use the first 5 colors in this list, so that way my data set will all come into play properly. I think I'm sorry, I've spelled it wrongly in the bottom. I'll change. Now my base of my pivot table is ready. The next logic that I am about to do right now is I'm going to create our pivot tables final dashboard sheet. It took around 13 minutes for me to build this data. It will take another 5 to 8 minutes to complete the dashboard. So I'm going to go back to our data set below, and then I'm going to add a new sheet, and then I'm going to call this sheet as dashboard. And then when I call this sheet as dashboard, I don't need this grid lines anymore, because if I see the grid lines, then I have to readjust the charts another dimension, which will really make my life a little hell. To make it better, I'm going to go to the view tab, and then I'm going to uncheck the grid lines out of the equation here. That will showcase my cells still, but again we will see this cells without a grid line here. And I told you earlier, we are about to use one of the word feature in our dashboard here. To do that, I'm going to go back to insert and pick up the word art, and then pick any one of the format. I'm going to take the normal format. I'm going to call this as sales dashboard. If you want to be more specific, last 5 years. If you want to keep the size of the dashboard headers this much, you can do that, or else you can just click this here and then use keyboard shortcut Control Shift lesser than. That's going to bring the data set a little smaller. It's going to bring the font size a little lesser here. So now instead of typing a cell and then using the merge centers another dimension, I am not using that. I'm using a sales dashboard in the last 5 years using a word art, which we normally use in a Microsoft Word application. Now I'm going to move all my charts to this sheet, so that by that way the connection between the charts and the slicer will be intact. So I'm going to jump back to my yearly sales, and then I'm going to give a right click here, and then I'll go and say move the chart. Then the move the chart is going to happen to the last sheet. I'm going to give OK there. By that way, that's going to move my chart here. If you feel the chart is too small, you can make it a little bigger. By that way, the data will showcase the dataset better. I'm using a 21-inch monitor screen, so I can expand it according to the list. Again, when you're using a lesser laptop size, or 13-inch laptop and 14-inch laptop, this will look a little bigger. So adjust it so that the visuality how the data set comes nice and clearly. Then I'm going to give a right click here. I'll move again the charts here, and then I'll take it to the last line and give an OK. Make sure the chart sizes, heights are matching with one another. If you want to make it a larger or more widthier, you can do that. And I'm going to pick up the sales rep again. I'm going to give a move chart here and then move the data set to the dashboard again. Give an OK. That's going to bring the data sets here. And I'm going to keep the data a little more wider and then a little more taller here. I'm leaving this blank space here because I'm going to add our slicer a little later. Then I'll bring this customer, and again, whenever I bring the customer, I would like to keep the customer chart as big as possible by me. When I give an OK, that's going to give the list, and I'm going to make this customer chart for more than one slide here. So I'm going to bring them to 2 slides here. So I'm going to just make it a little taller and a little wider. And maybe you can make it even more taller here because I have enough space to showcase them nicely. I'm getting all this dimension, and finally I'm going to bring my product data set also to the dashboard here. I'm moving it because I don't want to do cut, copy, paste here, so I'm moving it for one good reason. Again, I'm interested in the charts also on this point. Let me just showcase this data again. I think that this is okay. I don't see it is anything odd here. I'm okay with the data sets here. Perfect. So now I got my layout for my dashboard. I'm happy about that, but I'm going to make the data a little more readable, so I'll readjust it. Again, you can take a lot of time to build them all here. Probably you can try, because as I have a lot of data in every charts, I cannot use other chart types. If you want to see the chart types here, you can definitely use that. So I'll go back to my design in the charts. You can see, you can pick up any one of the charts here. So we have column, line, bar, wherever I have a lot of data. If you want to showcase the customer as a line diagram, you do have the facility to do so. But I'm keeping all the charts in one dimension. I'm not making it in any other dimensions I wanted it. Again, if you want just to make sure the data sets are coming a little differently, you want to try something new in here, you can try that. And I'm just not going to use that on that way, but again, I prefer to keep the data set in a single dimension. By that way, the data will look a little better. If you want to make the data set to work in this way, you can also do that. So I used a line chart and a bar chart here, as the data sets are humongous here. Now I'll place the cursor in one of our charts, and then I'm going to add a slicer to it. So I'm going to go back to my pivot chart analysis and add a slicer. The moment I add the slicer, it's going to showcase all the list. I can add a slicer one by one if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that because I want to create a report connection in this. So I will add whatever the chart that I have in here. I'm going to pick up year, I'm going to pick up region, sales rep, customer, and product, and give an OK there. Because all this data set will come automatically. I'm okay with the chart point here, and then I'm going to make this charts into multi-column here, and then I'll make it as small as possible, and I'll love to color this chart. Now the coloring of the chart slices will go off because I'm adding a brand new slices here, so I want to rebuild the coloring of the slices again. And I'm going to pick up the region here. Again, if I feel the region is okay to go in one column, I can do that. So I'm going to place them on the bottom here. And then the sales rep is also not that bigger. So again, I'm using a 21-inch screen here, so everything will come nicely here. But if you're using a lesser version, or if you're using the lesser dimension of the data, or the width is not that bigger, then you will see this is cramping your space a bit. In my data, it won't cramp much here. So I'm adding as many data as possible. So again, I'm adjusting it for my data set. Again, you can use it however you wanted it to be. Now I'm going to place the cursor in the region here, and then in the region part, okay, I'll make this as 2, so that I will try to match the height of this data to some extent, and I can make all these dimensions in one portion here. So how you want to place your slicer, I will leave it to you. And for the region, I'm going to color orange, and for the sales rep, I'm going to color green, and for the customer, I'm going to color ash, and for the product I'm going to color the light blue here. So now I know what is the chart that I'm using it and where I'm using it here. Now I took 20 minutes to build this. Again, you can make this even more better. Again, now if I use the charts, when I try to slice it out, you will see the charts slicing is happening only in one particular field, not in all the fields. This interaction is not happening all around my data set here. So I want to make sure that the data set takes all of them perfectly. To do that, I'm going to create a report connection here. I'll place the cursor in the slicer. The report connection can be built by the menu option also. So when I do that, it will automatically showcase all the dimension. Now it is only checking the yearly part. It's not checking all the other dimension. I want to pick all of them here. And this is the function that I will perform in every point. I can also use a right click option to get these dimension done. Again, I'm using the report connections as the data set, so that's gonna make my life a little more easier. So when I create a report connection, now whatever I touch in the slicer, that's going to change the data set completely here. Probably when I use the data sets, or when I create, or when I filter out the data, I'm not going to touch the yearly sales here, because yearly sales I filtered out for all our data set. So that's how it showcases. If I clear this, then it's going to showcase a lot of years in my list. Again, it is not really taking anything odd in my yearly sales when I filter it out. I'm happy about it. So now let's see how the slices is going to work. I'm going to pick up the last 3 years here, and then I can pick up Coimbatore sales is how much, and then I want to pick up Hema and Loki for the sales, and I'm going to pick up only Amazon and Chennai mobiles. And then you can see automatically my interactive dashboard shows a different dimension altogether. So Loki and Hema made a 0.4 million sales, and then the sales is only 2 million in 0.02 million in 2022, and 0.04 million in 2023, and 0.07. Again, they have improved their sales in the years to come. So again, they doubled it in the next year, and they tripled it almost compared to the first year here. And it is a Coimbatore region we are talking about, and in this Loki performs a little better than Hema. And then they sold 3 products here. One is Apple 15 Pro Max, Moto Razr 2, and OnePlus 10R. Again, I'm taking all this. When I take this filter out of the equation, then it brings all the people in place, and what is the sales done, and what are the products that they did. When I clear the customer, it brings all the products back again. When I clear the region, it brings all the regions back again. And when I clear the year, it's going to bring all the data back again. So I took literally a 13-minute to build this, or probably 23 minutes to build this data set completely. My interactive dashboard is ready, and I'm having all this data working beautifully here. So this is how you will create an interactive dashboard in PivotTable. Again, when I go down to this portion, you can make it as big as possible, because this is really coming nicely. So I'll make sure that this comes for the full page. And then if you want to add a background to this, you can add a background to this box here. Again, I didn't add the backgrounds for this data. So for this box, if you want to add a background, you can add a background here. I can add a shape fill here if I wanted to. So that can be relevant to my data set. If you want to make it dynamic, or if you want to make it more to the data set, or if you want to make a complementary one of them, you can do that. Again, when I do this, again, I'm going to change the font color here, because the font color is not black. So now this is going to make your dashboard look a little better. If you add a background completely, then this will become even more different. Again, when I add a background, probably I have to do the formatting part a little better. As I told you earlier, when I go for a chart, I never use the format part at all. So in the format part, I try to use one of them in this list, where I try to build our data set accordingly here. So this is how we build our dashboard in a pivot table. I created a pivot table, and a chart in one sheet, and I moved all my charts to the other one, and then I have made the slices later. Now if you want to make sure the data set are coming properly, so you can even improvise this, because I didn't add the chart title formats here. So you can make more text option formats here, you can make it fill, you can make it transparent, you can make it a little better here. So I'm going to make this data set a little more readable. So I'll select this, I'll make it bold here. So again, I'm making it manually here. Again, you can do that for all your charts that you're going to build. I'm only making manual effort here, so the data looks even better, and I can filter it. If I give this to anybody who was working on a dashboard, they can work with this, and then whatever they want to see, they can see it. The role players or the people who are working. So if I'm sending this dashboard to Aragu, and then Aragu want to see what he has done in the last 9 years period of time, then he can just click his name. Automatically that's going to tell his whole sales. He made a sale of 5.32 million rupees of sales, and then his sales was very good. He outperformed him in 2020, but the other years, again, he got 3 good years here. So 2020 is the first best, 2017 is the second best, and 2023 is the third best. And he performed reasonably well in the data, and his sales is a lot to Samsung Plaza here. And then you can see that the product that he sold, he's almost touched all the products that we sell here. Now no products, he missed it. If I go for Hema, then I can see a different dimension. Again, if I go for Loki, I'm taking only one dimension here to find out what the sales contribution done by each and every one of them. And if I want to see what is the latest year's sales alone, I take 2024. Again, in 2024 I have one full year, and then the total sales so far done. And then in 2024 we only concentrated on 3 regions: Chennai, Coimbatore and Trichy. Madurai and Tirunelveli is yet to be built, or it hasn't been built at all. So in the one full year of data, we didn't touch Madurai and Tirunelveli. I really don't know why, and that's a part of Achu. When I clear Achu's sales, again, maybe I would have assigned Achu for only one region here. Now the 2024 sale is 4.74 million here, and that's a good sale amount on a product which is sold drastically. And I had products on a high end, a middle end, and I can call the OnePlus as lower end phone in this list. Again, we are not concentrating on a much lower end. We are not trying to do any Oppo or other products here. So this is a high end phone that I'm selling. I'm still selling 4 million rupees of sales. That's a great point for me for a year. And then when I clear this, you can see them all nicely clearly. This you can pick whatever you want. I picked only 1 year, and I saw the regional wise sales. Again, you can check out this by 1 year, or you can compare the 2 years that we did here. So compared to the last year, the current year sale is better. And then you can see the sales component, and then which is the number 1 product here. Again, I'm keeping the chart as it is. I'm not sorting the chart in any dimension. I'm keeping the chart so that the readability of the chart will become better. So this is how we will create a pivot table interactive dashboard. Again, I have another 22 minutes to go ahead, so I don't want to take up the next topic that I've explained you today. This is what we're going to learn. We're going to learn 57 functionality. Again, out of that, I've already taught you somewhere around 7 functions here. So we will be talking about the other dimensions when we come back tomorrow. In today's session, I don't want to waste this 22 minutes. I will give you one more topics in our data set, because we are only touching the ribbon functions a lot. So I'm going to touch the next logic in here on the first 3 formulas. Again, this is the most used formulas when we are coming to the logical test here. I'm going to touch the first 3 formulas today, and the other 2 formulas are not available for us on a normal data. And then I don't know whether many people will be using that. That's why I've even named that particular point as rare usage. Nobody find the max if. Even the other dimension, I can call this also a rare, because very rarely people touch that as a list. Again, if you want to build them up, you can do that. Again, in here I'm going to touch one more dimension called unique formula, and then I'm going to touch a sort formula in this data, and when I do this, I will be touching the logic called remove duplicates if I wanted to. So again, this is a very rarely we touch this data. So again, if I'm using the unique functionality, remove duplicates is not required for our list to work around. So this is how we built our pivot table. So let me just rename this right now. I will save this sheet as interactive dashboard, and then you can use the raw data to work around here. So interactive dashboard using pivots. So this is how we build our data. So I'm going to add this to our Excel file list, and then let me take the data that we discussed a while ago. I'm taking the same data again. I'm not using the data anything other than that. So my data is going to still be the same when I work around with this data sets here. So it is opening all my files. I don't know, there is something wrong with the internet connection or my data set here. So it's taking all my list differently here. So I'm interested in the first data set here. I'm going to right click and move this data to a brand new sheet. And then I no longer need my other data here. So I'm going to close the raw data light. I'm going to close my, yes, I think that the interactive dashboard is also not required for me. I'm going to close that. So the next logic that we are about to see right now is called logical test. So what is a logical test is all about? So I'm going to talk about functionalities like a simple SUMIF, COUNTIF, and an average if here. So let me show you the syntax that we are going to deal with when we are coming to SUMIF. So when I go for SUMIF functionality, the syntax will be this. Let me take a screenshot for us on this because I just want to take the screenshot to the relevant data sets here, and this is the screenshot that I want to have here. So this is SUMIF for you. When I pick up a SUMIF, the SUMIF function will give you 3 different syntax here. Again, when I go for COUNTIF, it is not going to give you 3 syntax. It's going to take the first 2 syntax that we use in SUMIF. So again, I'm using the snippet tool here. And then finally, I'm going to take the count or averages for us. I'm just adding the formatting or the borders to it so that I can see them all nice and clearly here. So when I go for these 3 formulas, what actually SUMIF function will do? So I have a data here which is giving a bigger list for me. I would like to get a single cell reporting. So whenever I use the logical test, I'll call this as single cell reporting formulas. So this will allow me to get all my answers in one single cell itself. That is the agenda of this data sets here. So let's take a small example first of all on these dimensions and see how it's going to work for me. So I'm going to use one of the formula that we learned on our day 3, where we talked about math and trigonometry. I'm going to use the same formula called rand between here. So I'm going to come back here. I'll pick up a number called rand between, or a formula called rand between. I'm going to go for 10 rows and then 5 columns. I'm going to start with minus 25, and then I'm going to go until 125, and I'm going to call the numbers all to appear as an integer here. So I'm going to close and bracket and give an enter. That's going to populate the data. I'm going to just select all the data. So I'm going to copy, paste, special value it by using the Google keyboard shortcut. Copy is Control C, and the Google keyboard shortcut that I use for paste is Control Shift and V. Now what I want in here is I want to find out the positive numbers or positive totals here, and then I want to get the negative totals here on multiple dimensions. The first part that I'm going to deal in this data set will be on this data. I'm going to create a positive total using a sum if function and a negative total using a sum if function, and this is going to happen for the count if and also for the average ifs here. So now I'm going to use all these 3 formulas here. The first one will be on sum if, the second one will be on the count if, and the third one will be on the average ifs here. And before I do that, I'm creating a criteria for all the situation here. So I'm going to create a criteria. A positive number will be a number above 0. So I'm going to call this as greater than 0. And I'm going to call this as less than 0 for the negative number. And I would like to keep the criteria running everywhere parallel to the data sets here. Again, we all talked about the earlier dimension. So I'm going to come back here. Let me see whether this is going to work on the spell effect. I think it will work for you because I'm only using a cell references here. So let's see how to work on this point. I'm going to just say equals sum if and give a tab. When I work with sum ifs, again, normally I will give a Control A here. That's going to take you to my function argument. In the function argument, you can see that I have 3 different syntax. The first syntax is calling range, and automatically I know this is the range that I want to select. This is the number range, which is having all my details, whether the negative number or positive number available here. And the next point that talks about is criteria. The criteria is going to be the one which I want. If I want to get a positive answer, I'll give a greater than 0. I want a negative answer, then I'll give a less than 0 here. Again, when I use only numbers in my sum ifs and count ifs and average ifs, the third option is not required. And even if you see in a formula, it is not highlighted in my function argument. And this is an optional field. If you don't want to use it, you can skip it. If you want to use it, you can use it. If I come back to my formula one more time, how this optional field is displayed will be, it will come in a box bracket. So let me magnify this a bit. So I'll show you how this data actually comes out in here. So when I make this a little magnified here, so when the moment I go for a sum if functionality, you can see this is coming. The sum range comes in a box bracket. This you would have seen when we worked on our math and trigonometry function. When I used the round, round up and round down, I used one more formula called trunk. In trunk, the number digit was in a box bracket. The same way in sum if, the number of the sum ranges is box bracket. And I can skip this when I do deal with data like this. I don't want to really worry about it. But if I'm going to work on the other dimension, I will not do that mistakes here. So I'm going to come back to the data here, and then I'm going to select the ranges here. So I'm going to select the whole range that I want here. And as I'm not going to use the spill effect here, I'm going to use the spill effect here. I'm going to give a comma, and then I'm going to populate both the conditions here and close the bracket and give an enter. That's going to automatically jump and then add the data sets for me. Again, there is one real catch that we will have here. So when I do this, my formulas are working really nice, but again, the cell references will really play a major role here, because when I move the cursor to the second cell, my spill effect, does it work for me? I want to check that, because I'm seeing one, I have seen 10, 19, yes. I don't have a lot of negative numbers, yes. I think that the negative number total is perfect here. So again, it's coming out the data beautifully. So now I've answered both the dimension in one single logic. The same way I can do for the countifs also. Again, the only problem is when I try to figure out whether the answers came correctly or whether I want to check whether the answers are correct or not, then I'll be in a spot of bother here when I use the spill effect. I'm going to use the spill effect again for the countif here. And then I'm going to take the range here. You could have done a name manager here, but I'm not doing a name manager here. I'm going to give a comma, select the data sets here, and then close the bracket and give an enter. That's going to populate my number. Yes, I can see the differences here. I have 39 positive numbers and 11 negative numbers. That's the only reason why my negative numbers total is less. And I want to find out the average of the same. So automatically gives you all the data sets for me. So this is how we will normally create a sum ifs, countif, and average if here. Again, I used a very simple logic. I want to find out the total positive numbers here. I want to find out total negative numbers here, and I want to find the total average of positive and negative numbers here. Now, if I want to do this in this data set, this is the real challenge that I'm going to face here. So normally when I do deal with sum ifs functionality, I will either use them on top of my data set or at the bottom of my data set. So I'm going to just add some cells above, so that way it will take my data set work better. And I want to find out what is the sales reps sales so far. I want to find out the total sales for this guy, and then I want to find out the number of sales he made during the period, and then I want to find out his average sales also. So this is going to be a beauty of the data set that we are going to build here. I'm going to build the sum ifs and countifs here. Again, when I come back to this data, this time around I cannot skip the last option in sum ifs or last option in average if. The reason why is my range and criteria is going to be a little different here. So let me make this data better. I want to give this data a name manager to it. I'm not going to make this dynamic, so I'm not going to build the data. I'm going to only see what are the data that I have here. I'm going to select the whole data set here. I'll use the column based name manager. I'm going to Control Shift F3, and then that pops up a window for me. It says you want to name the data set by the top row. Yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to give an OK there. That way I got all my data sets coming up here. And I want to check whether all my name managers are enabled here correctly. So I'll go back to my formula bar, click the name manager. That's giving you all the name managers that I'm looking for. Before I go into the formula, I would like to keep the formulas intact here. So I'm going to just show only one of the formula here. I'm going to call the formula text for the sum ifs here. So let me make this a more readable one. So I'll make all the formattings which will make our data more readable here. Now I have the name manager, so bringing the data set will become very easy. So for the sum if, I have three different dimensions: range, criteria, and sum range. I'm going to use all the three in this scenario, because if I use only the criteria and the range, then I will be in a spot of bother. I'm going to call this, or I'm going to rename this as sales rep C, because this is the criteria that I'm looking forward for. I'm going to select this and create a name manager for this scenario also, because I don't want to create a name manager for the body of the data, but also for the conditions here. So when I choose the sum if functionality, so what will I do in this scenario? In this scenario, when I use sum if functionality, my range is going to be my entire sales rep column. So I'm going to take the sales rep completely. And then when I come back to the data set here, I'm going to take the sales rep C here, because the sales rep C is going to give you the criteria. So who is the one which I want to see as a result. And then if I do these two alone, my answer will be 0. The reason why is I don't have any number field here. That is the only reason why, even though the sum range is an optional field, I'm still using that in this scenario. Earlier I didn't do that because I had a number field. Here I don't have a number field, so I'll be taking the sales column also in consideration when I do it. So let's see how I'm going to do this. How I'm going to add this. All this data will automatically come for you. So I'm going to just come down to sum if functionality. The range is going to be my sales rep column. So I'm going to call this a sales rep. I'll select the sales rep here. You can see that at the bottom, the data selects all the sales representative from top to bottom. I'm going to give a comma. Then the region is going to be sales rep C. So I'm going to select sales rep C. When I do that, automatically takes reg. I'm going to give a comma. And now I want the sales column to come into play. I'm going to take the sales into consideration. You can see that my columns are perfectly getting selected. The moment I give a close bracket and give an enter, that's going to populate my formula automatically. If you want to format this so that the data set will look nice, I'll add a number filter here. I will add the format painter to add for the average sales too. And I want a number formatting for my number of sales here. If I want to give the average sales, it's not going to be very big. So I'm going to just copy this formula, paste it on the right, because the condition is going to still be the same. The only thing is that the formula is going to change here. So I'm going to come back and then change this to average if. When I do that, it's going to give you the average formula for me. If I want to find out the COUNTIF, again the COUNTIF will be a little different, because when I go for the COUNTIF functionality, the COUNTIF is going to take the first two conditions alone. COUNTIF doesn't count the data by one dimension. Again, it's going to count all my number of line items here. So even a text with a COUNTIF gives you the answer for you on the range front. So I'm going to go back to the COUNTIF range and criteria here. So let me come back here. Again, I'm going to take the first two part alone when I go back to my COUNTIF. Again, if I'm going for sum if and average ifs, then the data set is going to be different here. So the COUNTIF will only take the first two conditions here. So that's the difference here. So I'm going to come back to the data set here, and then I'll use equals COUNTIF, and then I'll take sales rep, comma, I'll take sales rep C. I'll close the bracket and give an enter. That's going to give you the number of sales that I have here. And it gives you the decimal portion. If you don't want the decimal portion, I can just remove that out of the equation. So I know the number of sales that I did by this particular customer here. But again, at the moment, I have only one customer coming up here. So if I pick up, one sales rep at the moment here. So if I want any other person here, I'll go back to that particular person. Normally, I'll copy paste this. Then the formula will give you the answer accordingly. Again, copy pasting is not a great option to do around with it or play around with it. This is where I'll be making one more dimension in a data set. That is called, I'll be creating a drop down menu for the same. So how do I create a drop down menu in Excel? This is where I'll be using one of our data sets that is called data validation. So data validation will make our life a little more better. So to create a data validation, we have a keyboard shortcut too. The keyboard shortcut for the data validation is going to be Alt DL. So that will pop up the window for you. Normally, I will do it in a menu. So if you're going for a menu, I will call this as go to my data tab and then get the data validation automatically from our data tool. So let's see how I'm going to do that. So I need a drop down here. But again, if I want to create a drop down, first of all, I need a unique list. I'm not using Google Sheet. I'm using an Excel here. If it is a Google Sheet, you can work it in a raw data. It works for you beautifully. But in a Microsoft Excel, you have to create a unique list first of all. Again, how I can create a unique list? I can create unique list in two different dimensions. I'm going to use one of them now. I'll teach the other one called remove duplicates or advanced filter when we teach that in a compare and contrast point. So I'm going to copy this header and I'm going to paste it somewhere on the right here, because I don't want this data to get blocked by some other fields, or I can just add this in here because I don't think that anything blocking in the data sets here. Now I want to create one more dimension, that is called I want to create a unique list of sales rep here. We already have the sales rep name manager coming up here. I'm going to just give equals unique formula. This is one of our Dynamics build array formula which will come from 2019 version. Again, if you are using the latest version also, this is going to work beautifully for us. So let's see how we're going to use this dimension better. I've already have this data with me, which will giving me the data set according to my output. I'm going to just bring the name manager alone in this scenario. That's going to give my data set beautifully in this list here. So I'm going to just call the sales rep column here. When I close the bracket and give an enter, that's going to give the entire sales rep names in here. And now I would like to create a drop down list. I got the unique list base. The drop down list unique list is the source of the data comes from my sales rep C in the J column for me. To bring the data set for me on the drop down point, I'm going to place the cursor where I want my drop down to come into play. I'll go to data and then I will take data validation here and click the first line called data validation. The moment I do that, that's going to pop up a window. If you want this pop-up to come without going to the menu bar, you can hit a keyboard shortcut Alt DL. So I'm going to just bring the drop down here. I'm going to select the list and it'll ask you a question. So what is the source of your data? I can either type here, but again the list is a little bigger. So I'm going to select this and add the body of the sales rep column unique list that I've created. When I give an OK, that's going to give you a drop down here. And now I'm going to just select this and then I can just check what is the name of it. I can automatically see the names are changing dynamically for me. Again, I want to check whether my answers are right or wrong. So how do I check that is, I will be adding a formula here. So let me just see whether I can add a formula here. So I'm going to add some more space here. Yeah, let me add this and then I'll just take this format out of the equation. So I'm going to go back to my home tab, take the formatting painter, take all this format out of the equation. Now I want to check whether this my sum of the sales, count of the sales and average sales are right or wrong. So for this, I'll be using a drop down menu to check the data and then I'm going to use a formula called subtotal function. So we talked about a subtotal function lightly. So this is where the real case scenario of subtotal function will work very effectively. I'm going to start in the same pattern. So for the subtotal function, I just want to reiterate that one more time. When I go for subtotal function, I can do 11 different formula in here. I can do average, I can do count, counter, max, min, product, standard deviation sample, standard deviation population, sum, variance sample, variance populations in a normal data set here. So at the moment, my agenda is to create a data set which is gonna make my life a little more easier here. So how do I do that? So when I go for this, I can pick up the numbers here and then I can start working on it. I don't want the number to populate here. I want to make sure the data set work a little better for me. To make sure the data set comes easily, I'm going to add the numbers here. I'm going to call the 9 here for the sum and then 1 here, 2 here for the count and 1 for the average. Again, it's all formatted already by the rupee symbol here. I don't want them. I want to make it general here. So by that way, it won't give you the data set with the decimals here. So now I want to populate this formula. I'm going to use subtotal function. I'm going to select the number above. Then I'm going to give a comma and I'm going to bring the sales column into my calculation here. Close the bracket and give an enter. I'm going to populate this all around here. Again, I'm getting the rupee symbol here. I don't want that. I would like to keep the count as numbers, or I can keep the count as general point. That's going to give you the list here. Now I got my entire list coming up here. Now if I add a filter and check the value, it will be better. Now this is where I want to add this data with one more dimension, that is called table feature. The moment I add a table feature, this will make my life a little better because I can add a slicer to my data with ease. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to add a Control T to the data and give an enter. That's going to give you the list. And then again, this is creating one small mess for me when I do it because it's only coloring the first column. The color is happening for the other column, but it is not showcasing it because I have a formatting done for this dataset separately and this dataset separately. To make the format uniform, I'll go back to the home tab. I'll take the fill out of the equation here. The moment I do it, automatically my dataset will give you the entire list. So I'm going to select the whole data again. I'm going to remove the fill out of it so you can see that the colors are happening to all the list. I would like to make a small change in the fill option here, so you can just change the fill option to something else if you wanted to. So again, I'll select the font. Yes, I'll make it a little lighter, so, or maybe more dynamic. Yeah, this is easier to read because I have the black font coming up here automatically. Now I got the table. I would like to add a slicer to the table called sales rep and give an OK and reformat it however you wanted it. Again, I'm keeping this into 2 columns here. If the data is nice, yes, I'm happy about that. And I would like to keep this colors of this to maybe an orange here, so that's somewhat relevant to the colors of the table. Now when I remove all the other dimension and keep Loki alone, you can see the sales are matching with Loki here. When I work with this, I'm working in a raw data. If I want this to make it differently, so I'm going to go back to the drop down menu, select Hema, and whatever name that I'm selecting here, I have to select that in my list also. By that way I can see both the answers are coming spick and span. I can just clear this so that I'll see all the data in my data set and my answers will also change here automatically. This is how I will use sum if function in Excel. So I'm using only one dimension here. I have used if function. I didn't do the multiple point here. I'm going to use the sum and a count and an average is what we have learned today in a list. As I had 20 minutes available, again I've extended our session to more than an hour today. So this is how we use sum if, count if and average if. When we come back tomorrow, we are jumping back to the pivot table 2.2 to learn more about it. So we will see how we're going to use all those dimensions better, and then we will come back to the sum ifs again on Monday for our workout. So this is the way we learn and this is the way we work on it. Again, start using all these dimensions because this is taking a real toll to our workout. So keep enjoying, keep learning, and I see people have started watching my pivot table video already, and start watching my pivot table interactive dashboard and the other videos that I'm going to add in the subsequent days. Sunday I'm taking a break, but the other days I'm giving you all my classes here. Thank you so much guys. Have a great day ahead. Enjoy your time.